With great power comes responsibility. Do whatever that you want to your best ability. And there is nothing that's impossible with possibility. I am possibly the hero that nobody knew they knew him off.
Hi everybody, welcome to this special episode of A Rose That Grew in the North End. I'm Danny Myers Frierson, and I'm a North End girl through and through. I'm really excited to be here to talk to James J. Jeter, one of the co-directors of Full Citizen Coalition. So tell me a little bit about, I like to talk to people, I like to have a conversation on their background, where they're from, and some of the work that they do within the community. So tell me how you started. Tell me about James.
James is a Connecticut native, born and raised in New Haven. Was incarcerated at the age of 17, sentenced to 30 years with 5 years special parole. Of that time, I served 19 years, 10 months. I came home and decided that I didn't want to go back to New Haven, so I came to Hartford, to the Halfway House, actually at the corner of Sargent and Signey. Yeah, that was 2016, and then I started my first job in Hartford was actually at the Hartford Community Loan Fund, which is above Kent Pizza. So I was doing policy work there, and going to Trinity, and really started to learn the structure of what governs our community, like what the structures of what governs culture, and it was disturbing, you know, and it was also a process that I realized that we weren't involved in. At that time, I was venting to Kennard Ray, and he was like, "Yo, I'm doing this thing. Let's do it together." And so we started working on parole disenfranchisement, you know, with Unlock the Vote. That was Full Citizen's first campaign, and we organized throughout the state, especially in Hartford, for 3.5 years around that campaign, and passed that legislation in 2021.
Let's go back.
Yeah, wherever you want to go.
17 years old.
Yeah.
Sentenced to 30 years. How did you deal with that, and how did your family deal with that?
Yeah, I'm not sure how they dealt with it. My mother's a very closed person, so what she went through is what she went through. She won't. That's just how she carries things, and I guess I carry things the same way. But I dealt with it I don't know. I'm not one to lay down anything. So, you know, I spent my time preparing to get out. You know, over maybe 5 years into my sentence, I wrote my mother a letter "Don't give up hope, I'm coming home." And when I came home, she gave me that letter back. So you know, I just yeah, I had support. You know, a lot of people don't have support, so I had support in my family, and spent my time just educating myself in any way I could. I spent the majority of my time in Cheshire Correctional Institution, and I spent probably 16 years in that prison, and so I spent 11 of those years in the school. I was from business classes to writers' workshops, to community college courses, to Wesleyan courses, to tutoring. I just engulfed myself in education.
Why was it so important for you to do the time and not let the time do you?
Prison has poor mental health resources.
Talk about it.
And so, you know, I think one of the largest hurdles is all of medical in prison. You come out disconnected from your health because it's not a functioning system. I mean, I don't think out here is a functioning system either. I think in there it's exacerbated on how people treat you. It's dehumanizing. And so, you know, you don't really engage in any of those things, and there's no privacy. So you find ways to, you create your outlets. You know, you create your outlets the best way you can to hold on to what you can hold on to and to come out like with some resemblance of a functioning person, because nobody comes out fully functioning. But you know, you find ways. So education was mine, and it was productive for the most part. I'm a very hard critique on college and prison. Having been in a couple programs and helped design the Yale program, so I'm very hard critique on the benefits as opposed to the detriments of institutions coming to institutions. So, but you need hope.
Definitely.
And one thing that it does present you with, whether it's, you know, real or perceived, is hope.
So tell me why it was so important to create Full Citizens Coalition.
One, I didn't create Full Citizens Coalition.
Okay.
So Kennard created Full Citizens Coalition. Kennard put me in at its beginnings, and we built Full Citizens together. The idea that he created the name on was that to be able to fully function, you know, in a country where citizenship embodies your humanity, it's the one thing that we don't get to actualize often. And so, especially once, you know,
we meaning black and brown people?
Meaning black and brown people, meaning black people, you know, yeah, and black and brown people, our history is like directly rooted in the lack of humanity from a possession standpoint, you know, and coming out of that, how do you come out of that and become equitable? I don't like to use the word equal because I don't know if I want to be equal to certain things, but you know, how to be equitable and to have the freedom to, you know, create, to live, to own, and you know, so I don't know if we've ever, no, I don't believe we've ever reached that point. I don't know if we ever will. But in that, the fight has to be based on the structure. Like, the design of the country is very specific. And if we don't have any access to that design, then, you know, I think there's other conversations that we as people need to start having. But I think that it's necessary to exhaust every outlet to have ownership of the design. Like the Constitution is this living, breathing document that out of it comes American culture.
Absolutely.
You know, and so
with that document.
So
with that document, all these amendments happen, right? Because this document was not created for us, right? At that time, we were what? 3/5 a slave?
So there's no such thing technically as 3/5 a slave, but this is the crazy part about it. This is like direct Connecticut history, right? The Connecticut Compromise structures our current government. So this was in 1776, right?
What's the Connecticut Compromise?
The Connecticut Compromise is where 3/5 comes up. So the southern states, Connecticut senators structured the Connecticut senators which a lot of the stuff in the state is named after. They structured our current government by bringing the North and the South to an agreement. Southern states had more revenue and they had a larger population because of slaves, so they wanted more say. They wanted more say in government. They wanted their slave populations counted towards their population count. And so northern states wanted smaller government. They didn't want anyone counted that wasn't a person, right? And the compromise that came out of that was that every state would get 2 senators, you know, because they also wanted the amount of senators that they were able to have in office to be based off of tax revenue. And because they had people as property, they created more tax revenue on plantations. They created more products on plantations. And so the compromise was that every state would get 2 senators, and the House arrest would be based off of population count, and that southern states would be allowed to count 3/5 of their slave population towards their population count.
So essentially, it wasn't necessarily, the Emancipation Proclamation wasn't about freeing us. It was about redistribution of bodies.
So we're going back up to 1776.
Okay.
So this is when
We're going to school.
This is when we're actually structuring the nation. So the Connecticut Compromise is what structured the like once we have the Declaration of Independence and what government looks like amongst the United States, this is where the ideology of us being 3/5 a person is born, because southern states were allowed to count 3/5 of their slave population towards their population count and having strong representation in the House of Representatives. And when you fast forward, 90 years to the Emancipation Proclamation, it's not necessarily about us at all. It's about development. It's about who would control the West as the West was being settled and the natives were being wiped out. Who would control the West and what industry would control the West. If it was about humanity and humane practices, well, the North had factories that were inhumane, and they were killing white people. We had white kids dying in these factories, and that didn't stop for another 60 years to the early 20th century. So it wasn't about being humane. Lincoln said if there was any other way to save the nation, the Union, without freeing the slaves, he would have did it. So it wasn't a matter of, for us, it was a matter of how does a country move forward and what will be the industry that dominates the country. And they didn't want it to be slavery.
Can you tell me a little bit about when New Haven and Hartford were the capital, when they shared that time?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting time in Connecticut history because not too many states had 2 capitals, and then such a small state. So it's not like it was like California where it would make sense to have 2 capitals because such a large state. I think it's about population density and control. Like New Haven has certain, Yale is older than the state.
Yeah.
And the colonist society that came from England and started structuring America, they did it through building institutions first, like Yale. So New Haven had a stake in the game at that point, but Hartford was the city, like up until, 60, 70, maybe no, I'd say like this, the 1950s, 60s, when the population completely cut off. But Hartford was set to be a city of 1 million people. It was the industrial city, so it made sense to have the capital be Hartford.
I had the opportunity to come support Malik.
Yeah.
And just walking through the city of New Haven, it's just, you can see everything, like even down to the building,
Mm-hmm.
the post office, and just the courthouse. You see all the history, it's all there. And tell us a little bit about Malik and some of his plight and what you've been working with.
Yeah, so New Haven has interesting history with these two young men who both have the name Malik Jones. So I'm going to start there. Malik Jones, born and raised in New Haven, was killed by the police in 1996. Illegally. It was East Haven police killed him in New Haven, pursuing his car after his car stopped, after he put his hands up. You know, they shot and killed him. Ironically, Malik Jones from Far Rockaway, New York, ran away. It was a 16-year-old runaway, came to New Haven with a group of older individuals and found himself on the streets of New Haven, living and fending for himself, and wound up being taken in by a family, and just so happened that the family that took him in, their house was the trap house. So, you know, that became his reality. And at the age of 19, he found himself being framed by the New Haven Police Department and the District Attorney's Office for a homicide he didn't commit. And so that was 1992. And it took him 31 years to prove his innocence. Yeah.
How did full citizens support him?
Man, so, you know, the neighborhood that Malik went to prison, the neighborhood that the case happened in, the neighborhood that Malik used to be in is my neighborhood. And so he's always, like, been this figure to me personally. And then going into the system myself at 17 and being around him, and at one point being the cellie and really understanding what had happened to him. It's something that I never let go of. And so we really just started about maybe 5 years ago. I think 5 years ago in 2018, I had took on a position, I created a position at the White Hall at Yale called Civic Allyship. And I used that position to create this program, to create a project called Children of the Storm. And what that project aim is still ongoing, is to re-examine this time period of policing in New Haven, which results currently in New Haven holding more than 50% of our state's exonerees on wrongful convictions. And really looking at how it took place, looking at the culture that was created, you know, in a city and governed and ran a city for almost 3 decades. And Malik's case, you know, was one that was always on my mind, and one that I just knew it. I knew the case. Like, I knew everything about the case. I grew up knowing about this case. And so, you know, prison had given me some really interesting relationships. So me, Malik, and Scott Lewis, who's another New Haven exoneree, who has the Scott Lewis Center at the Argos. So we all were in like a writing class in prison, and it was a freshman at Yale to come in and teach this like poetry and prose class, and her name is Sarah Stillman. Like, right now she's a writer for the New Yorker, and she teaches at the journalism school. And so me and her used to work together. I used to pull in the guys from prison and parent were her students. We were getting articles published. I had students doing research, following FOIAs on different officers, and we started building, really trying to build out this case against the police department and the district attorney's office. And we produced a couple of things. There's some website called Holding Me Captive, which looks at how these cases align between officers and charges and illegal practices, and just never letting go. You know, Wesleyan actually reached out to me and was like, the Jewett Center, and so I was a CPE student and had a relationship with the Jewett Center at Wesleyan through the Center for Prison Education, and they reached out to me and said they had some money to shoot a short doc, and they know that I've been trying to, like, in my mind, have this larger project that I want to create, and so they gave us some money, and we worked with the DDC, which is the Digital Design Center at Wesleyan, Hartford native Pedro Bermudez, and Elliot Kimball, a student at Wesleyan. You know, they got with us, looked at our research. We set up some interviews, and we shot this documentary about Malik's case, which started to garnish a lot of attraction around what happened in this case.
What were some of the things that you guys found within his case?
Well, it's what we knew.
Okay.
And so, but being able to have a platform to speak to it, Malik was framed. Like, there's no other way to contextualize what transpired. The only eyewitness was a friend of the victim. The victim was actually visiting her at her job at the hospital, and her story hasn't, you know, there are things about her story that she doesn't remember clearly because it's been, 31 years. But what she has never forgotten was the actual shooting. And so she's always described the shooters, you know, and her description of the shooters don't fit Malik. She said that the two shooters were between 130 and 140 pounds, and Malik was arrested 2 weeks later. He was 200 pounds. You can't put on that type of weight in a matter of weeks. And it's not so much just what she said, it's how there was other evidence that within the first 48 hours of this case supported what she said. So one of the assailants, one of the shooters, the very next morning, so this happens around 1 in the morning, around 9 o'clock in the morning, he confesses to a friend. He doesn't know that the person he confesses to is a certified informant for the police department. So he confesses because 2 girls come through the block, you know, cuss him out, saying, y'all dudes over here crazy, you killed my man, So he leaves, says, yo, we need to go get some guns because we don't know, like, me and so-and-so killed this dude last night, and I think they're gonna come back through here. So within 2 hours of hearing the confession, he went and told the police what he heard. And he gave them 2 names. The police couldn't catch up to the shooter that talked to him because he wasn't from Connecticut, and he immediately went back to New York. But the other shooter, they picked him up. He was 16 years old. They picked him up. They questioned him. And Sheila McCrae described in her statement what one of the shooters had on. She said he had a bright hoodie and some multicolored Bo Jacksons, sneakers. When they questioned the other shooter, and they asked him, one, where was he at night of the shooting? He says, oh, I wasn't there, but I was down the street. And they said, well, who were you with? He says, I was with the other shooter. You know, he has no idea that they have a whole confession. So he places himself with someone who confessed to the crime and someone who puts him in the crime, right? And then he says, I was with him. And then when they asked him what did he have on, he gives the same description of outfit as Sheila gave as one of the shooters. So this is in the first, week of the shooting. All of the evidence that they knew in the first 48 hours is all corroborated, right? And so they went back to Sheila, 2 days after her initial statement with a photo array, and they were forcefully trying to make her identify Malik, and she wouldn't do it. She was like, I don't know who that is. They've never met. They don't know one another, right? And so she doesn't know she's not identifying Malik. She just knows that the picture they're showing them is somebody she doesn't know and someone she never saw. That's all she knows, right? And she finds out later that this is who it was, and they were trying to forcefully make her say it was him. They came and harassed her so much, she lost her job. Her only intent in this case was to bring whoever killed her friend to justice. They charged Malik 2 weeks later off of the words of someone addicted to drugs who had been caught with drugs. and they gave him a fabricated statement to say that changed what they knew. They knew that there was only 2 shooters. Now they have a 3rd shooter. They arrested the 16-year-old and Malik for the homicide. They never caught up to the other shooter, and he was killed 6 months later in New York. So when trial comes, they don't call the person that they initially arrested Malik on a statement. They call his co-defendant at that time. They offered him 8 years to implicate Malik. The thing is that the statement that he gave, and this is what the state knew, this is what the district attorney's office knew from 1992 during arrest till 1995 at his original trial, is that none of the evidence that they had supported his statement. So when I'm talking about evidence, I'm not just talking about what the only eyewitness who was a friend of the victim. I'm not just talking about the confession of one of the shooters, but I'm talking about their forensic investigators' evidence, the ballistic evidence. Nothing supported their witness's statement at this time. And they still went forth with the case. And, you know, he's spent, you know, that was 1995. The federal judge in August, in her ruling, said that the appellate court messed up. They should have overturned this case. That was 1997. And so there's this issue where the illegality of what the police do is then codified in law through prosecutors who are willing to do whatever for the sake of a conviction, and then your freedom now becomes tied into processes, and the truth is out the window, right? You can't argue truth. You got to argue that something went wrong in how they prosecuted you, whether your lawyer was ineffective, whether it was a Brady claim because they withheld information, or that they denied you constitutionally a fair trial by refusing to let some evidence in. But the fact that you're actually innocent doesn't matter, right? It matters to you, right? But he had an actual innocence hearing in 2015, and at that hearing, the only eyewitness, the only eyewitness, she came forward, and at the time when she came forward and testified on his as to what transpired, his co-defendant was sitting in the courtroom because he only did 8 years. So we're talking 17 years, 22 years later, right? He's been home. But now he's in the court saying that I lied, that I was given this amount of time to lie. And he's sitting in the back of the court. Now, she doesn't know either one of these guys. She walks into the courtroom, and when she gets on the stand, they ask her, do you see the shooter in the courtroom? And she goes, he's sitting in the back of the court. She still knows his face from the night of the shooting. She was like, well, what about this man? She was going, I've never met this guy. I never saw this. I don't know who this is. I know who I saw that night. I saw him.
And that was in 2015.
And that was in 2015. Then he gets on the stand and says that they gave me an offer to testify against Malik. I didn't even want to testify against him. I told the prosecutor that I didn't want to go upstairs. I didn't want to testify. And he told me if I didn't go upstairs, they were going to take my deal and give me a life sentence. So they forced me to go upstairs. And the judge said that he found neither one of them credible. Mind you, his prosecutor during his case is now a judge, which creates problems, right? And so, which creates more problems than, we can talk about that, because it's not just about his case, it's also the fact that these people have now set over cases.
And they
right?
risen through the ranks.
Risen through the ranks, into a place where someone. Do you think that illegality and having these thought and being willing to move like this ends there? Like, they're now judges. They now oversee this, right? And so, the thing about that is that if you actually look at what the co-defendant says in 2015, though a judge found it discreditable, he was able to say that he doesn't find it to have any weight and to be real. It's actually more in line with the first two statements he gave in 1992. 1992, when they asked him who was he with, he identified the shooter that was later killed in both statements. When they asked him, were you with Malik? He said, I wasn't with Malik that night. I told you who I was with, right? The only statement that doesn't add up is the one he testified to in 1995. We can believe him. We have every right to believe him because the prosecutor also knew that Sheila McCrae said that Malik wasn't there. He just chose to prosecute in a particular way. And so I think there's a problem in this our state system that, you know, relationships trump law, and people's freedoms and lives and are lost, and their children suffer, you know. And it's not just, you know, a New Haven thing. Corey Turner from Harvard, same situation. You know, right now he's after 20. I think Corey might have 28, 27 years incarcerated for a crime he didn't commit, where his judge committed fraud in the courtroom in order to discredit his alibi.
So, I want to continue the conversation, and I want you to tell me a little bit more about the kidnapping of black bodies.
Man, that's very broad. That's very broad. I'm gonna start with a story. So I had this organization a national organization that we rock with. You know, they do these organizing trainings and whatnot, and they offered to take us back to Ghana. And I was like, yeah, I'm with it. And then they started talking about how, like, you know, a friend of mine who I went last year was like, yo, they spend so much time at the point of no return. You know, they walk you through the dungeons, and I was like, I don't want to see that. And he was like, what do you mean? And I was like, yo, I don't need to see that. I've had my own point of no return. Like, I've been in shackles. I've been shackled with feet and hands. I've been taken from my family. That's not why I want to go back to Africa. Like, I want to plant my feet in the soil and understand who we were, not, you know, not the trauma of what happened to us, because that has never stopped. So, men and women, you know, they find themselves trapped in the system that doesn't relent. Like, the wheels of justice are very fast on the intake and very slow on the on the correction and outtake. And there's so much harm done in between those times. I don't know what it is to sit innocently for decades, but I've seen it. Like, I've witnessed it. I've witnessed the fight. I've witnessed the discomfort, the agitation in men who can't shake it, you know. And you know, it's different. They do a different type of time, and you know, I think we as Black folks need to be aware not just of that, but the fact that we got a lot of missing babies right now.
Yeah.
It's a lot of, you know, in Connecticut, not just, you know, and it feels like we are prey, you know. So I think that's something to, like, be aware of and to wrestle with. We, you know, like, the staple of our work isn't wrongful convictions, it's voting rights. And for me personally, it's like the last, that's it. Like, after this, it's like either we wrestle with the theory and we look at ways to create power for us in our communities. Like, and it's not even about, like, national power. It's like all these black and brown cities, can we own them and run them, right? And
is that even possible? What do you say to those that don't believe in voting?
I say you have to look at, abandon what you've been told, right? Because as a people, we've never done it, right? So in this state alone, when they ended slavery in 1848, with the caveat that we can't vote. So when they carved that out from the inception of citizenship from the gate, you have to believe that there's something to it, right? They know there's something to it. And they've repeatedly created ways to keep us locked out. Felony disenfranchisement, the removal of rights because of a felony conviction, whether you're in prison or home, is just the most efficient way. Because they've created all the policies to keep that going, right? And we don't vote, so therefore they have the power to keep recreating the policies, right? So mass incarceration starts 50 years ago, 1973, the Voting Rights Act, Civil Rights Act, 65, 68, 73, mass incarceration begins. The 70s, you probably see the pinnacle of, the civil rights movement is over with, right? But then you have this, at the end of that, you have this revolutionary movements that start across the country because they knew something, right? And all of these revolutionary movements are based off of constitutional law. They're based off of understanding their rights, whether it's the Panthers or the Black Liberation Movement. Like, they understand law and rights, and they're operating in those things. And when they fall apart, they understand the only thing that you can create after that is violence. So you see bombs and everything else because they were like, oh snap, this don't work. But the ability to evolve in thought from that time period is lost to us because our communities get flooded with heroin and then crack, right? And these narratives get created around our bodies that remove the perception of how intelligent we actually are, right? It just becomes this fear, this criminality in the black body, right? And, we go from running that out of our communities to where it becomes the aspiration of our communities. And that's not a judgment, that's just the reality. That was my aspiration as a youth, right? You don't realize that policies govern your life. You don't realize that the way your schools is funded is a policy, that the way how property taxes play a part in your communities, how small businesses are funded through government grants, how they don't make it to your community, to people who have ideas in your community, that all this stuff is a part of policies and the people who are in office controlling that, we don't vote for them. We don't vote, right? But that's systemic because, Ken Green in 2001 restored voting rights back for people on probation. He made it possible that once you have a felony, you're not locked out forever. But that's 2001, so that's 28. So prior to that, when you caught a felony, you can never vote. Mm-hmm. We don't want to catching felonies like that. So the conversation never was in our homes to play with what this is, to wrestle with how can we go about this. And so all we know is that, oh, this dude running here, Democrat, I'm a Democrat. Why are you a Democrat? What does that even mean?
Because my parent was one.
But what does that mean to your parents? Anybody ask themselves that? So they don't want you to question it because, whether you vote for them or not, you believe in the ideology that, oh, they don't want us for us. But examine it. Examine who's actually for you, right? And then set a standard of examination. Well, my schools ain't better. My housing ain't changed. The job market ain't better. Are they for me?
Right.
They arresting us for these guns, but they ain't stopping these guns, right? But we going to jail for these guns. We got to hold everything, though it's not created by us. Right now, we play our part because we move through it. But when you move through it young, and we get indoctrinated young, that's not an indoctrination of wanting to be criminal or wanting to be in activity. It's an indoctrination of understanding that my house got more month than money. Everybody around me in the same situation, and it looked good out there compared to what I'm living. It just looked better, right? And so you take penitentiary chances. And they're creating that. Like, the school proficiency in Hartford is roughly 12%. So school proficiency is, census tract data where they track reading and math in the 4th grade. But in the 4th grade, they also begin to target for the school to prison pipeline. So if your proficiency is 12% in the North End of Harvard, right? So these are all things that can all be fixed, right? Well, Harvard doesn't have the tax dollars to fund their schools. All right, but we're surrounded by wealth. And they all come into the city to work.
They do.
So we can't share property taxes to better our schools.
That would damage the system. Now you know that.
Right. So you get an election year like this year. People say, well, why should I vote? Well, forget the candidates, right? Here's one thing you know about the major cities in Connecticut. Whoever wins the Democratic primary pretty much is the mayor.
Right.
4,000 people voted in the primary. It's 65+ thousand registered voters, the majority of them Democratic. So if you can write anybody's name in. If you organize, and not one person got all 4,000 votes, if you organize 2,000 votes in your city, you can write in somebody and throw the whole system off. Like, there's so many ways to play with voting that we haven't even said, let's just rethink this through, and we can create power. We can disrupt the system, right? And with it, we can take that route. I look now, because at this point, you see, like, or you hear people say on TV, whatever. I've never had anybody say to me actually, but like, if you don't like it, go back to Africa. That's like a real option. Like, that's something really to think about and consider. Like, you know what? Maybe you onto something. But before I go that route, let's see if we can just one more time play with this theory. And if that's not it, let's have a new conversation. But we can't have no conversation, because that means that we are now allowing ourselves to be subject to whatever somebody else is doing. And we lose.
What are some of the upcoming legislations and things that Full Citizen is working on, and how can people follow you guys?
This is a great question. So check our website out, fullcitizenscoalition.org. We are currently right now working in halfway houses, group homes, youth facilities, and working with participants and staff on understanding voter rights and voter engagement and the history of disenfranchisement nationally, but specifically in the state of Connecticut. Come legislative session, we'll be submitting legislation. It's a short session, so we're really trying to figure out what's the best route. Short sessions are hard to pass anything in, so it's an election year, so everyone plays it tight. But we've been active through emails in our county jails and soon to be in our prisons around voter education. So if we can start by turning our county jails into more functioning voting apparatus, like having more access to the ballot for those who haven't lost their rights, and showing that it can work, then it gives us like the ground to run on to push for full enfranchisement in the up and coming sessions in 2025. But our goal is full enfranchisement in the state. There's never a reason why anyone should ever lose what is to be inherent, right? And you can't compare it to gun rights. Like, when people say, well, you lose your gun right, why should you keep your voting right? There's harm in losing your voting right. There isn't inherent harm in losing your. I don't think anybody's losing any of their rights, period. Right? I don't think that's what should be up for debate. However, at the very least, there's inherent harm in removing someone's voting rights. You rob a community of something so vital to it, and that's our legislative push, is full enfranchisement. And you can get involved on any level of support. You just say, yo, I'm near. Where and you know, that day was I think it was an eye-opening day for the courts themselves, because you know, you showed up to a federal oral argument. There was 70 people in that courtroom. That doesn't happen. It's not state court. It's not arraignment. You know, this is 30 years later. They're used to empty courtrooms with just lawyers and a body, you know. But when they walked into that courtroom and seeing all those Free Malik t-shirts, people with pads and taking notes, you know, it changes the atmosphere. It changes people, because now they're knowledgeable of what's actually happening in these courtrooms. And that's something that we haven't been as a people.
Yeah.
You know, these systems aren't larger than life. They're not these huge apparatuses that we can't change. We can change all of them. You know, so like I said, Corey Turner is someone that we're looking to support more in Hartford, who is also sitting on a wrongful conviction and was also maliciously, fraudulently set up by his prosecutor. So, you know, these things don't end, and there is an actual tie between the two of them, because our judges are appointed.
Yes.
Our DAs are appointed, but they're appointed by your governor, right? So if we're not having a say in who that is, you know, then we get stuck with people who are harming our communities.
Yes.
You know, if we're not having a say in who the mayor is, then we're not having a say in, you know, how small business lending is happening in our communities, where businesses are allowed to be set up in our communities, what housing looks like in our communities. We're just taking it. We're taking whatever is being given to us, or living under it, you know. And so these are our rights, and we love talking about this stuff, so.
Well, I look forward to continuing the conversation with you. As always, like, you're so dope. I love the work that you guys are doing, and however I can support, however, I'm there.
Appreciate you.
Thank you for.
And you asked like the dopest question last night, which I was so mad that no one, I'm texting, I'm like in the private chat, like, yo, ask him how do they emotionally process this stuff, and he just, you know, the moderator is also, he's only been home a year or so he's like, yo, I didn't see anything he was texting me. Like,
thank you so much for taking the time and sharing space with me. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for joining us and sharing in this space, this very safe space with Mr. Jay Jeter, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
I remember when my fans were closer to zero. My life is a movie, you ain't see the B-roll. Everybody got an issue, but got no dinero. Everybody's looking for another hero. I guess I gotta be they Stan Lee. I spit lyrics for the family, saving people's lives on the daily. Got them going down, but lonely and narrow. I made it my mission to become a hero. Yeah, open and seen is what it seems. A kid without a dreams, who looked at superheroes, hoping that's what he could be.